The upcoming mission that we've been talking a lot about, the year-long mission by Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko, is going to focus a lot of energy on gathering information about how living in space for 1 year affects them. But the work won't end when they come back from space. In fact, for Dr. Millard Reschke, who's joining us today, it will just be beginning. He is the co-principal investigator of a joint experiment with the Russians called field tests, and that's short for recovery of functional sensory motor, right? Performance following long-duration spaceflight. He's also the chief of neuroscience at NASA, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that experiment. Thanks so much for joining us, Mill.
Oh. Good morning.
All right. Well, I know that we know a lot about how spaceflight affects astronauts when they get back to the ground. But can you tell us a little bit about what some of those effects are?
Well, it's really a pretty complicated question you're asking. The simple answer is that most of the changes we see are due to a number of different factors. One is the time that's spent on orbit, as well as the transitions from the Earth's gravitational field to the weightlessness of flight, and then from weightless back to the Earth's gravitational field again. That's where we see the biggest changes, primarily because the organs that are responsible for our spatial orientation and balance, located in the inner ear, are affected by these kinds of changes, as are the pressure sensors, for example, in the bottom of the feet. The astronauts have been unloaded now, in this case, for 6 months or more.
Okay, and this is something we studied a good bit during the shuttle days, right? But not so much during space station time?
Yes, that's right. We had a really nice ongoing program with the shuttle flights, but we looked at various components associated with balance and return from space flight, as well as other systems in the body. And then we had a very nice program that was done with the Russians, that
Okay.
we're looking both at the shuttle and the Mir flights.
Okay. So this is work that's been ongoing for a while, but we're going to, I guess, amp it up a little bit with Kelly and Kornienko staying a whole year in space.
Yes, the importance of that is really looking at how people are going to be able to perform after very long duration flights. Say, for example, a trip to Mars.
Right, because we want them not only to be okay when they get back to Earth, but also be able to function when they're on Mars, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, so what do the crew members actually have to do when they get back from space to take part in this study?
Well, we began this study with what's called a pilot field test.
Okay.
Simply because I think there was some concern whether or not we could actually get the crews to perform in the various testing that we were going to be asking them to do.
Okay.
And the pilot field test essentially did some very simple measurements to start with that were titrated from easy to some very complex and difficult ones. For example, the simplest is simply rising from a chair unaided.
Okay. And this is right after they return, right? Before they've even left the landing field.
That's correct. It's immediately
Okay.
after we take them from the Soyuz capsule, where they're put in the recovery chair for TV ceremony.
Sure.
And then into a medical tent and begin testing there.
Okay. And then does it continue for longer after that, or is that pretty much the end of that part of the test?
What we're interested in is developing a time constant of recovery
Okay.
of the various functions. So we test in the field, or if it's impossible, as it was this last flight,
Sure.
with the weather in Karaganda or in Kakistan being what it was.
I think it's like that kind of often, right?
Yes. March is a very bad time. So we test at the airport that they're transferred to, either in Karaganda or Dagestan.
So you've done several of these pilot tests, and they've gone okay? You're confident that you'll be able to do the same with Scott and Mikhail?
Yes, we are. The Russians, actually, our Russian counterparts have been doing part of the advanced field test that we don't do. So we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to carry out these measurements.
Okay.
But to finish what I was saying,
Sorry.
just briefly, we test again at the refueling station in Scotland on their way home, and then when they arrive in Houston.
Okay. All right. So you're waiting a long time to get just a few, not even a whole day's worth of tests done.
Yes.
Well, hopefully that'll get you some good results. I know that part of this is that you're working pretty closely with the Russian researchers on the test. Why is that important to the study?
Well, it's important because the Russians bring a number of tests that we typically don't do.
Okay.
In looking at the returning crew members and their ability to recover.
What kind of test can you say?
For example, they do some things that ask the crew members to perform some relatively difficult maneuvers, like getting up from a chair and walking as quickly as they can, turning around a corner, and then stepping over obstacles in their way.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, are there any benefits to the research for those of us back here on Earth?
Yes, there. Hopefully, there will be. When you look at our population and the population of the world, I mean, we are somewhat of an aging society, and we have people coming back from battlefields that have difficulty because of injuries
Sure.
and so forth. Take, for example, this simple sit-to-stand test that I was talking about. It's a very common thing that everybody does every day, multiple times. But for a returning astronaut, for a person 55 years or older, for example, or people with disabilities, it's not an easy exercise many times. And failure to be able to do this results in dysfunction in the sensory motor system, perhaps institutionalization, and in worst cases, even death.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like very interesting and important research. We appreciate you coming in and telling us a little bit about it.
Been my pleasure.